Hey, this is Bob the Web Builder and welcome back to the Greenshift full website build series. In the last episode, we have built my header, footer, single post and single page template. And in this episode, we are going to build the homepage. Let's go!
So this is what the Greenshift homepage looks by default. And this is how we want it to look. So what do we need for that? First of all, we need a section with 2 columns displaying my services. Then my portfolio with a 3-column grid. Then a CTA, call to action button. Then a little info about myself in the 2-column grid. Then again a 3-column grid with some testimonials. Then a call to action button again. And lastly, the latest articles from my blog in a 3-column grid as well. All right. So to edit this template, we can just click on the edit site button over here, and it will take you right into the template. So you could of course go to the admin with editor and then templates, but this is a faster way, which will take you right into the right template. You can also do that on any page. So if you click on any page on edit template, you will go to, or edit site, you will go to the template for the pages with single post as well. If you go to a single post and you click on edit site, then you will go to the single post template. So that's the easiest way to get there. So let's see what we have here. We have a group block and we have a number of columns in it which holds all the content you see on the site. And of course, first of all, we're going to delete this and we are going to add our own. And just like the page and post template we already built, we are going to start with a main block. Okay, so in that main block, we are going to add a section. And for that, we are going to add a div element and another div element in that. So the first div element is getting the tag section. And we want to add a class of section to that as well. So let's add this. And the second element is just keeping the div tag, but it needs a class of inner section. And this is going to be our content width. So we already have a variable for that. So let's go to size and let's go to max width and let's set the content width for this. All right, let's save it. And on the section itself, we would like to have some padding, and we would like that to be responsive by default. So we want more padding on desktop than we want on mobile. So for that, we are going to use something called a clamp function. So when we go to the side of Kevin Geary, he has a clamp calculator on his side. And you can just set your root font size, which is 100% in this case. And we are going to set a min device width of 360 pixels and a max device size of like 1360. That's our content width. And we want like a minimum value of 1.5 rem on mobile as the spacing and a maximum value on desktop of like 3.5 rem. And now you see it creates a clamp function over here, which auto calculates the default value, which is in the middle. And we are going to paste that in our style book. So we add a new variable, and I like to use 2 different variables for top and bottom and left and right margin, or padding in this case. So let's call this section left right. And let's paste in the clamp function. This is a spacing. And the bottom, and for now we are going to keep that the same values. We can always change that later because we have different values for those. Okay, so we have section top bottom, section left right. Let's save this and let's go back to our template. Let's save this as well. Let's save the class and let's refresh. So we're going to load the new values. All right, so we have our main element, we have our section element, and we are going to the spacing tab. And we're going to set those variables over here. So of course, for the top we want section top bottom. For left right we want section left right. The bottom again top bottom, and the left of course left right. Okay, so now we have set all of this, and as you can see now we have some spacing on all sides. So let's rename this to section, and let's rename this element to intersection so we know what it is. And we are first of all going to save this to the library. So we're going to create a pattern which is not synced, and we just call this section with intersection. Okay, so the intersection, the section itself is full width and it has some padding on it, and the intersection is the content width we have set in our website. Okay, now let's first create the first section that we have over here. So that's this one. I already saved this background image in the media library, so let's add that to the section. And let's rename this now to the intro, or let's call it the hero. It's the first section on the page, which is called the hero most of the time. And on that hero, we want to set our background. But we might want to use the background on different pages of the site, different areas of the site. So we're going to put it in a class, and we're just going to call it background1. So let's upload the image from here. I didn't add it to the media library, but I did add it to the right folder that I want to use, which is this one. And here is background one. Okay. And there we go. We want this background to be fixed and to cover, no repeats. And again, position attachment is fixed, so it's a bit of a parallax effect. All right. And now we want to add those two columns over here. So for that, we are going to add a wrapper, which is going to be our grid in this case. And let's see, I don't think we have classes for that yet. So let's call this grid 50. So it's a, or let's call it grid 2. So it's a 50-50 two column grid. Okay. Add the global class. Then we go to the layout tab, set this to grid, and set the grid template, columns to columns. All right. So this is our wrapper. We could set this class on the intersection as well. That would work fine too, but we are going to add a different div for this. So in this div, we are going to add two div elements. So we have the two column layout, and we need to add a gap. So we're going back to the style book and add a variable for the grid gap. So this is a contextual variable. We are only going to use it in grids, just like these section variables are only used on sections. So it's not like the spacing values we have over here that we could use throughout the site. And let's call this 1.5 REM. All right, add new. Let's save it. Let's refresh the builder to load these variables from the database. Let's go to the column class, to the grid class in this case. And let's add these as the column gap and the row gap. And as you can see now, there's a nice spacing between those two columns. Okay, let's save this in the database. And let's add some classes to the columns itself as well. Let's call this the grid call class. So we're not going to add any styling to this at the moment, but we would like to have a class on it for future references. Okay, so let's see how these are supposed to look. Well, first of all, what you see is we have a little border radius. We have a semi-white background with a little opacity so we can see the background through it. And there's also a shadow on it. So we need to add another class for that. And let's call this like something like call on backgrounds, because we're only going to use this styling when there is a background image. Okay, so what did we need? We needed a background color of white with a little opacity. So let's add a background color of white and let just a little bit of opacity for that. Okay, now we also needed a border radius, and we would like to add a class or a variable actually for the radius. So let's go back to the Greenshift stylebook again, and let's just call this radius, and let's make it 0.5 area to start with. Let's see, we have border radius as a type, so we can just use that. Okay, save and save. Let's see if we have saved this to be sure, and refresh the builder again. Okay. So we go back to this column, and go back to the border, link the radiuses up, and now we can get our radius variable over here. All right, that's great. And we also need to add a shadow. So we could make a variable of that as well, but we are just going to add it from here. And let's add a preset, something like this might be nice. Okay. So let's save this, and let's set the same class on here. Let's see what the class name was. Call on background, okay. So let's find that one, yes. And now this has the same styling. Okay, that's great. And now let's add some content so we can actually see what we are doing. And first of all, we want two icons on the first one. So it's a desktop icon and it's a mobile icon. So for that, we need to add another wrapper, but to keep everything clear, let's add some renaming here. So this is the grid, or actually the services grid in this case. So we know what it exactly is. Services grid. And this is services 1. And this is service 2. Okay, so on service 1, to get two icons next to each other, we need to add it in a wrapper. So this is going to be the icons wrapper. And just like we did last time, we are going to put two SVGs in there. All right, they have to be in the wrapper in this case. And now you see the white background showing up. So let's go to Font Awesome again to get the icons, and let's search for desktop. Copy the SVG codes. And there we go. And we want also a mobile icon. So probably this one. Copy that and paste it in the second SVG elements. Okay, so as you might remember, Greenshift adds a default sizing to these icons. We want to delete that from here as well. And of course, we need to add a class to this. I think we already have, no, we don't have an icon class yet. Okay, so let's call this icon extra large because it's a very large icon, of course. And we're going to give this a size. Let's see if we can just use our normal font sizes that we already have. I don't think they are large enough in this case. Yeah, no, they're not. So we are going to add a value of maybe just the default 50. That's a little too small. Maybe like 100 pixels should be okay for now. I guess so. So let's call this icon XL. Let's do it like that. All right. So let's add the icon XL class to this one too. Okay, so now you see we have a different height when we actually would like to have a different width. So we shouldn't determine the width, but we should determine the height. So let's see what the right height would be for this, like 100 pixels. Yeah, maybe just a little less, maybe like 80 pixels would be better. Okay, let's keep it like this. And then the wrapper we have to set again to flexbox. And center it. Okay, so this is our icons wrapper. Maybe I did not save this class yet. Okay, and on the wrapper, of course, we need a gap again. So we could use our grid gap for this, but that's a bit too much. So we're going to use our small spacing gaps. Let's see, maybe the space M gap is just fine. They're a little bit closer together, so maybe the space S gap is a better option. Yeah, let's use that for now. Okay. And then we need a heading, which is in this case, I think my H1 heading. So this is my most important one. Let Bob build your new website. That's my most important service. So we're going to use an H1 heading for this. So let's add after. Just for the H1 heading elements. And let's just copy this. Let's paste it in here. All right, great. And then we need an icon list with this icon in front of it. So for that, we are going to add an icon list. So Greenshift actually offers an icon list element by default, which is this one. So if you want a quick and easy way, you can just use the default icon list, which consists of a UL element, an LI element in that. Then in there are two div elements with one SVG. But we are going to create this from scratch again. So let's just add two div elements to start with. First div element is getting the tag of UL, which is over here. And the second div element is getting the tag of LI. So UL stands for unordered list and LI for list element. And of course, the list element should be in the UL. Okay, then add some items in here. So we need an SVG element for the icon. And we need a div element with text for the text, of course. So they are both in here. All right, perfect. So what we do not want is this little dot in front of the li. So we are going to set this to none. And I also want the spacing here gone. So we are going to add a class on this one called icon list. And we are going to set the spacing to 0. Let's see if it's the margin or the padding. Well, similarly, it's the padding in this case, so we can reset the margin again. Let's save this and let's add some classes to this one as well. So this is going to be the icon list item. And And this one is going to be the icon list icon. And this one is going to be the icon list text. Okay. So now we have classes for all of these. Let's add some content. So we want a checkbox over here. Not this one, but we want it in a box. Yeah, something like this one seems nice. Okay. And then let's add some text over here. Let's copy this one. Let's paste it in the content. All right, perfect. Okay, so this one is now stacked under each other. Of course, we want them next to each other. So we are going to add some styling to that. We could do that on the icon list item class, but you can also do it on the icon list parent class. So that's what we're going to use in this case. So let's add an li and let's set it to be a flagbox again. Yeah, perfect. Justify the content to the start and align the items center. So this is nice and clean. All right. And of course, you want a column gap in here as well. I think we need our space S for that. Let's see if that works out. Yeah, that looks fine. Maybe just the XS. Yeah, we will see. Let's see how it looks when we style the SVG, which is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to back to here and we add an SVG subselector. And we give that a width of font size. Let's see, maybe just a normal font size width. And again, just like we saw with this icon in the header, we first have to reset the size, which is in the local class by Greenshift itself. For that, we're going to the SVG elements. We're going here and we're going to reset this. And now it falls in line nicely. We actually need a default font size. We do not have a variable for that yet. So we should create one in the stylebook then. Let's go to Greenshift stylebook. Add a variable font size. Let's call this font size M, which is the normal font size in this case. Font size M. And that's 1.2 rem is the size. All right. Go back to the builder. Let's save our work. So let's save every class. Probably did not do that yet. Maybe this one I did. And let's refresh the builder. So it knows there is a new variable. All right, so let's go back here. I can list SVG. And instead of font size S, we're going to use font size M in this case, which makes it a little bit bigger. And of course, we need it to be the green color. So let's see if we already have that in our color palette. We do not, so we need to add that as well. So let's go back to the style book. Let's add a color and let's see which color that we need for that. So on the live side, let's inspect this. Because he wants to know which color this is. It's the before in this case, and it's 090. All right, so let's add that. In the style book, of course, not here. Edit 090, which is this green. Yes, perfect. All right, so let's go back. And again, refresh the builder. So it knows that there's a new global color added to the palette. Go back to the icon list, back to the SVG, and then we can select our new color. Okay, so perfect, this looks fine. So what I like to do with these kinds of icons is make it a global pattern. So we are going to create a synced pattern in this case, and we're going to call this list icon. Okay. So now I can just edit everywhere, and when it needs to change, I can change it from one place. Okay. Let's duplicate this. I think I need it about 5 times. And let's add the right content. Okay, let's save our work. And it seems this is a little bit too small of a spacing, so we are going to add some more. So we're going here, and we're going to set the column gap to S instead of XS. That's better. The row gap as well. Okay. And we also want to set the list itself, the UL, as a flexbox too. So we can get that out. But of course, this needs to be a column direction because we want it stacked under each other. And we want a gap. Let's try space as well here. If that looks good. Yeah, that actually looks fine. Okay, perfect. So let's save all of this again. And this is our icon list. So the last thing we still need to add are these buttons. So let's add a button wrapper for that as well, because we need two next to each other. So let's add a div. Let's call it the button wrapper. Or buttons wrapper, actually, because there are two buttons in it, of course. Okay. And let's add two link elements inside of that, which are going to be our buttons. All right. So we need to add some classes to this, and we are going to give this the class of button wrapper, or buttons wrapper actually. Let's make it a global class. And we're going to give this the class of button. All right. So now we are going to add some button styling, and we're going to do that on the button class, not on the wrapper like we did before, because we might want to use these buttons without a wrapper on other pages or other parts of the site. So we're just going to add it over here. So how does my button need to look? Well, first of all, it needs to have a yellow background with a black text on it. And when you hover, it needs to change the colors. Okay, so let's add that first. So let's add a yellow background. Let's add a text color. And let's use the same color for the link as well. just to be sure. Okay, so now let's add the content. Request a free quote is what it needs to say. Oh, that's not the right one. Let's go over here. Request a free quote. Yeah, okay. So as you can see, there's no spacing at the moment, and this also needs to be a little bolder. So going back to the button class, then typography. Let's add something like a medium, and we do not want these to be underlined. And of course, we need to add some spacing as well. And let's see. Let's add some space S to top and bottom. Which looks fine. And we want some more spacing on the left and right, so let's add some space L there. Or space M. Space L might be a bit too big. Let's add some space M on the left and right. All right, that's great. Let's save these styles for now. And let's see what we need. We need a border too. So let's add a border, 1 pixel solid, and it needs to be the base color. So it is dark color, okay. That looks quite the same. Yes, very nice. Of course, it's a little bit bigger, but we decided that our font is going to be a bit bigger than on the original site. All right, so now let's add the hover colors. So let's add the subselector and let's call it hover. And we set the background color to black. And of course, the text and link color needs to be yellow in this case. On the hover style. So let's do this and let's see if it works. And that looks fine. All right, very nice. So now we add the same button styles to this one. So this is going to look exactly the same for now. And this needs to say more info. But as you can see, we do not want this to look the same. We want this to be an outline. So we're going to add another class called button outline. Okay. Add it as a global class. And for this, we do not want a background color. We want it transparent. So let's put it like this. Then it's transparent, as you can see. Okay, so that looks fine by default. And it has a white color on hover on the original side, but I actually like this better, so I'm going to keep this the same. Okay, we're not going to change that. And of course, in the buttons wrapper, we need a gap between these. So again, we are going to set this to flexbox, in this case a row. And we're going to add a column gap of something like space L. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, let's keep it like that. That's great. Okay, so now the only thing we need to do is add some spacing to this column, because as you can see, the content is touching the edges of the column, and that's not what we want. So let's add some spacing, and for that we are going to add a contextual variable called card gap, because these kind of layouts with a background and rounded corners and some shadow, they are called cards in web design. So we're going to add a card gap in the style book. So let's go to variables and add the card gap. All right, let's add it here as well, card gap. And let's make it something like 1.5 rem is the spacing. Here we go. Okay. Now let's make sure we have saved everything on our button and a button wrapper classes, and let's refresh the builder. Go back to the column, then go back to our call on background class. Let's select all with that icon and then use our new card gap over here. And let's see how it looks. So this is the original site, and this is my site, the new one. Yeah, that's starting to look quite fine. So now let's just delete this one for now. And let's duplicate this because they're almost the same, just with another icon and of course other content in it. So let's change out the icon. We only need one icon for this, so let's delete one. And we need a range. Let's see if it's in our icon library. Yeah, it is, but this one is open and we want it solid. So let's go to font awesome. And here it is already. Let's add it over here. Okay. Let's change out the content. Let Bob improve your website. Perfect. Now we have to copy paste all of this. Okay, so now we have the right content in, and we have to change this heading, which is actually an H1 to an H2 heading. And since it's already an H2, we do not want this class on it anymore. Okay. So now you see that there is a little problem that we have a bit more spacing over here than we have over here, and that's because there is some margin on the H2 and also on the H1 by default. So we need to remove that. But we don't want to remove it globally because a bit of margin comes in handy with things like blog posts. So we want to keep it by default, but we want to remove it when there's a grid call class. So let's go to there and let's add a H1 subselector. Let's set the margin to 0 and 0. Then you see it's gone over here. And let's do the same for the H2. And there also seems to be a bit of margin on the UL. So let's go here as well. UL, let's say the margin is 0 as well. Okay, so now there's no margin at all in this card, which is of course not ideal either. So what we need is a gap between the content. So let's create another variable called content gap. And let's make it like 1.5 rem again. Space and save. All right. So now let's refresh the builder. Go to the column again. And we're going to set this to be a flexbox. And the flexbox by default is set to row. So that means that it stacks everything next to each other. And we do not want that. We want it to stack on top of each other. So we're going to set this to column. And we are going to add a row gap, which we just created, the content gap. Set the scroll gap as well. We don't need it here, but still, let's set it. Okay. And now our hero is done. So now let's move on to the second section of the homepage, which is the portfolio. So what do we need for that? We need a section, we need a H2, we need a subheading, let's make that an H3, and we need a 3-column grid for the portfolio items. Okay, so let's go here and add a section which we can add from the pattern library because we've saved it over there. And let's rename that to portfolio. And in there we need an H2. An H3. And a 3-column grid. So let's create it. We don't have that yet, so we need a wrapper div and we need 3 columns in there. Okay. So the H2 tag needs to say Bob's portfolio. And this actually needs to be centered, but we can just add that as a local style. Here we go. Then the H3 tag needs to say, oh, let's go to the portfolio. Your website can look this good too. All right. And then a 3-column grid, but we do not have a class for that yet, so we have to add it. Let's call that grid 3. And we're actually going to steal the classes from grid 2 because they're almost the same. So let's copy the styles and let's paste the styles over here. Add and add. And now we can remove this one. We don't need that anymore. We only need to adjust this from 2 to 3 columns. Okay, perfect. The H3 heading needs to be centered as well. Okay. So now let's add the elements we need in this portfolio grid, and we need an image, we need a description, and we need a button. Okay, so let's add those elements in the first one. We need an image element. We need a P element for the description, and we need a link element for the button. Okay, so let's add our first image. So I already have some screenshots over here, which I want to use on this website. So let's add those to the library. And let's first use this one. Okay. So the P element has to say this text. And then the button needs to say visit this website. And it needs, of course, to link to the website itself, but we are going to do that a bit later. Okay, first of all, we need to style this to be a button. So let's add our button class. But this is actually the outline button. So let's add the button outline class as well. And we need both of them because if we do not use the button class, it doesn't look like a button, as you can see over here. Because the main styling is on the button class, we don't want to repeat that on the button outline class, so that's why we are using 2 buttons. And actually, we want to have the button class first and then the button outline, because that's a variation of the button class. Okay, so that's how it looks now. And actually, that looks quite the same. Let's see how that looks on the front end then. So now we see there is no space between this paragraph and this button, and that's because we didn't use our grid call class here yet. So let's add it. And what you see happening now is that the button spans the full width of the column. That's just the default behavior of flexbox. And we should actually set align items to the start, but that will solve this. But if we do that over here, then it will mess up the styling over here as well. This needs to be centered, but because we have set it to the start, it will be to the start there as well. So we don't want to do this on the grid call class. Let's align items, let's remove it. And let's add another class for this specific card, which is called a portfolio card. Like this. All right. And let's set that style on here. So align items to the start, and that will fix this problem. Okay. And another thing we see is that the spacing here is larger than the spacing in between here. And that's because there's also some margin by default on a P element. And we did not set that as a subselector yet. So let's add that as well. So space P, 0 and 0. So it zeroes out that as well. Let's save the portfolio card. And let's see how it looks right now. Yeah, so this looks very nice. Okay. So let's see if we have classes on this, and let's also add classes on this as well. So let's call this portfolio card image. This is the portfolio card text. And this is the portfolio card button. So notice I'm not putting any styling on these classes yet. This is just for the future. If I need to add some specific styling to these elements of this card, then I can just use these classes that I already created right now. Okay, so let's rename this portfolio card. And now we are ready to duplicate it. So let's duplicate it over here. And let's duplicate it over here. Okay, so on my original website, on the live website right now, I have 15 of those. We're not going to add all 15 right now. Let's add like 5. So you can see that because of the grid settings, it will automatically wrap to another row. So when we add 6 and then 7, it will just add another row for the 7th one. Okay. So as you can see, the spacing between these cards is a bit less than I would like. It's less than over here. So I saw that over here as well. It's just a little bit too small. So we need to make it a little bit bigger. But since we have used a variable for this called grid gap, we can do that. So let's just edit the grid gap over here. And let's see how it looks right now. Let's see on the front end. And that's way better already. Okay, so whenever you're using things like this, so the same layout just with different content and a lot of those kind of items, you want to use a custom post type and query this with dynamic content and a query loop. We are going to look at that in another episode. So for now, let's move on to the next part of my website, which is this call to action button over here. So this is not important enough to be a section on its own. It doesn't have enough content. So we are going to use a normal div for that instead of a section. But we are going to use classes to style it because we are going to reuse it all over the site. For example, it's over here on my homepage as well. And it's also in my blog posts and it's also on other pages. So let's start it with a CTA class, which stands for call to action, of course. And in here needs to be a button, which is of course a link element with the class of button. Very nice. Okay, so let's add some styling to the CTA class. First of all, we want the background to be the dark base color. So this one, we want to display it flex. We want to center everything. And we want to add some padding top and bottom. Let's use a space XL for that. And that seems nice. Okay. So let's see what this button needs to say. And it says, yes, I want such a beautiful website too. All right. Yes, I want such a beautiful website too. Okay, perfect. So let's save this class and let's see how this looks on the front end. Okay. So what we see at first is that this text is way too small. So we are going to try another font size. So for that, we need to add another class, which is called CTA button. And we set the font size to font size M. Let's see how that looks. It's better, but it's still too small. So we need a larger font size for that. So let's go to variables again and let's make a font size L. And we're going to set that to something like 1.5 rem, which is a size, of course, yes. Now it is added. And we're going to refresh the builder. Go to the CTA button class and select our font size L. All right. So that looks better. We do want a normal font weight in this case. Perfect. Let's see how it looks now. So this is the original one and this is the copy. Okay, that looks quite nice actually. So only problem is when we hover, then the button disappears because the background color is the same as the background of this container. So we want to keep it yellow as well on hover. So for that, we are going to add a subselector like this. And we're going to change the background color to this yellow. And also the text color, of course, needs to be changed to this base color. Same for the link color. Let's see how it looks right now. Yeah, this looks way better. But now we don't have any hover effect anymore. And that makes it harder for people to understand that they can click on this. So on the original website, we have a arrow that appears when you hover over the button. So let's see if we can add it here as well. So for that, we need an SVG element. And let's see in the library if we have something that looks like the arrow we have on the live side. And it seems we do. All right, that's great. But that needs to be in the link in the button, of course. And for that, we need to set this to blocks. So let's first copy this text and set this to blocks. And now add a div element with text here to bring back the text. And let's drag the SVG element in the link element as well. Okay, so that actually looks quite nice already. So now, of course, we need to add some styling to it, and we are going to do that on the CTA button. So let's add an SVG subselector to that. And let's set some styling. Let's set some sizing first. And we're going to use font size L, the same as the font we are using here. But that probably gets overwritten by the default SVG element style. We need to delete it first. Okay, so now it looks the way we want it. Yes, very nice. And we need to set the CTA button to align the items to the center like this. Very nice. And the SVG needs to be the other way around. So let's go to CSS transitions and then transform the y-axis to rotate. And we're going to rotate that 180 degrees. So it looks the other way. Very nice. All right. So now we would like to have some spacing between these. So let's go back to the flexbox again. And let's add a column gap of something like space S. Let's see if that's enough. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay. And now the only thing we need to do, of course, is hide this by default and let it appear on hover again. So let's go to the SVG and set it to display none. And then add another subselector which says hover SVG. So it targets the SVG on hover. And let's set this to display inline block. So now when we hover over it, then it appears. So now let's move on to the next part of my homepage, which is this About Me section. So first of all, we need a section with a 2-column layout. So let's add that to my patterns and then click on section. And in there, we want a 2-column layout. So we need 3 divs for that. Let's do this in here. Okay. And then we can just add our grid 2 class, which we already have, to make the 2-column layout like this. All right, perfect. Now we need to add a heading that says why choose Bob. And another heading in this column, which says who is Bob the web builder. That's great. All right, then in this column, we need a icon list with the same checkbox as we had over here. So to make it easy, we are just going to copy that one. So in the builder, the checkboxes aren't shown at the moment, but they are on the front end. So you can just safely copy this and use them over here. So let's choose add after and then Control V to paste it. Okay, and now we'll just have to swap out the content again. All right, so that's done. Let's save it. And now add the next part, which is this image with some text next to it. Okay. So we are going to use a grid layout for that. So let's add it. So this is the grid and these are the grid columns. So in the first column, we're going to add the image. Which I already added to the media library. And in the second, we are going to add a p element, the paragraph which holds this content, which actually should be 3 p elements in this case, but let's put it in one for now. Or actually, let's just paste it in here, and then core should automatically make 3 p elements of it. So that's better. All right. So now we have to set our grid. Let's go to layouts and choose the CSS grids. And we could just use 2 columns like this. But if we look at that on the front end, we are probably going to see that this is a bit too wide, and we need actually a bit more space for this one. So what we want is to use the Greenshift grid builder in this case. Let's go to that, and let's click on enable grid builder. So what we actually want, we can auto detect the number of items, but we set the amount of columns we want to 3. And that way we can just drag and drop this one to be twice as wide as this one. And then it should look a lot better. As you can see, that is the case. We only need to gap this out a bit. So let's see what we can do about that. With the column gap over here, we can set our grid gap, but that is way too wide, as you can see. So we will just choose our content gap instead. Let's set that for the row as well. And let's see how it looks now. And that actually looks quite well. Again, of course, with the P over here, the paragraphs, they have some spacing above, and also the headings have some extra spacing as well that we don't want. And we know the solution to that. We can just use our call grid over here, our grid call actually, and that will fix all of that right up. It will space it all out nice and simple. Yes, this looks a lot better. So the only problem we still have now is that there is no space anymore between the paragraphs over here. But we can easily fix that by setting a grid call class on this column as well. Because the grid call class has a gap of content gap. So now it gaps out nicely. Okay, so that's it for the About Me section. So the next part of the homepage is this testimonials section. So let's add a section again. And in there, we of course need an H2 heading, which is what the Bob's clients say. All right. Let's center that again using a local style. Great. And for this, we need to set a light gray background. So let's use this one. So we have a nice difference between this and this section. All right, and under that we need a 3-column grid again. So 1, 2, 3. Actually, we need one more. And those 3 we will move to this one. And we can just use our grid 3 class for this to set the 3-column grid. So what needs to be in the grid? First of all, we need to have this little icon. Then we need to have an image of the one that writes the testimonial. And then we need a piece of text and the name. Okay, so this is testimonial text and this is the name of the one that gives the testimonial. All right, so let's add all of those parts. Let's first add an SVG for the icon. Then below that, we want to add an image element in this case. And we want to add two paragraph elements. Let's just use the Greenshift ones. Let's duplicate this one. Okay, so let's rename it so we know what is what. So this is the icon. This is the image, that's clear enough. This is testimonial text. And this is the testimonial name. All right, that's great. So now let's add some classes to this. So we are going to call this a testimonial card. Then this is the testimonial icon. All right. Testimonial image. Testimonial text. And the testimonial name. Okay, so now everything has its own class and we can start adding some content to it. So first of all, let's add the icon. So we already have the quote icon over here, which we need, which is just in the library. So we can use that from here. And let's add some styling to that from the class. First of all, let's delete this. And let's add it over here. Let's make it a bit smaller than it normally is. Let's say 40 and 40 pixels. Let's see how that looks. And we of course need to add some spacing and the background color. First, let's add the background color. All right. And this needs to be round. So we're not going to use our radius variable for this one because that's not round. We are going to use this preset circle. That looks quite fine. And now we need to add some spacing and we are going to use our space S, I guess, for this one. Let's see how that looks. Space S and space S. Okay, that looks quite nice. And then we want, of course, the fill color to be white in this case. And we also want to have a white border of like 2 pixels, I think. Let's make it white. All right, that looks quite nice. Yeah, that looks fine for now. All right. So for the image, let's use my own image for now. And then let's copy this testimonial text. And let's copy this name. Okay. So this needs to be a column, testimonial card. Let's set that on this class. So let's make it a flexbox. And let's make this a column. Let's justify the content to the center. All right, that looks quite good already. So now let's go to the image class, because we want to make this a circle as well. So let's go again to the presets and make this a circle. And of course, we don't want it to be this big. We want it a bit smaller. As you can see over here, it's not that big. So let's make it like 100 pixels. Let's see how that looks. And the height as well. That looks quite good actually. So whenever you set a fixed width and height for an image, you want to set the object width to cover, so it will keep its original proportions. All right, so let's see what else we need to do. We need to add a background to the card, so let's go back to the testimonial card and let's set a background of white. And of course we need some spacing for the card again. So we have a card padding for that. Let's discard gap in this case. And let's put that on all sides. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks good. All right. And now the only thing we still need to do, I see this is not white, this is just a little less, little lighter gray than the background. So let's adjust that. We do not have a global color for that, so we might just want to add one, or maybe we will just use a little darker gray. That doesn't look too good. Yeah, we can just keep it on the class view. Let's just do it a little bit like this. So it's just a little bit gray. Not too much. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So now we only need to move the icon up a bit so it overlays the box over here. And for that, we need to add a bit of negative margin, same that we did over here with the header logo. So let's go to the icon class, go to spacing and add like minus 50 pixels. That's a bit too much. Minus 40 pixels maybe. Let's see how that looks. 45. Yeah, 45 looks good. Okay, so let's keep it like that. That looks nice. And then we need some spacing between the icon and the image element. So for that, we could set some margin on the bottom of the icon as well. So let's make that 45 pixels. It's a bit too much. Maybe 35, maybe 30. I'm not sure. Let's see how that works out. 25. Yeah, 25 looks fine. All right, so let's make sure we save all our classes. And then let's see how this looks on the front end. Refresh it. Scroll down. And this looks quite nice actually. All right. So now we are going to rename this testimonial grid. No, we want to remove these. So let's delete them. Rename this as the testimonial grids. We should actually give this its own class as well. Again, for if we want to add some styling to this specific grid for testimonials in the future. And we should do that over here as well. We didn't do that, I think. We didn't do that here yet on the portfolio grid. Nope, so let's add a portfolio grid class there as well. Great. Now it's all future proof. All right, so now let's duplicate and duplicate. And that looks very nice. So that's it for the testimonial section, although we do need some spacing between the heading and the testimonial. I don't like this because of the icon that has moved up, so we need a extra spacing. Let's do it on the heading element. Let's set some margin bottom on that one, and let's make it like 25 pixels or so. Okay, that's not enough. Let's make it 45, 60. Yeah, maybe something like that. That looks nice. Okay, so that's it for our testimonial section. So the next thing we need to add is another CTA, another call to action. So we are just going to duplicate the one we already have. And let's move this to the bottom. Let's change the text to request a free quote now. And we are done with that. Let's move on to the last part, which is this block section. So let's add another section again. Not here. Should be, of course, on the root level and in the bottom. Okay, let's rename this to block. Okay, and let's see what we have here. So in this case, we of course need to add a heading again, but this is a special heading. This one has a animation with some words which are rotating with the type effect. So for that, we are going to need Greenshift's advanced headline block. This one, advanced heading. And we need to click, let's see where it is here, enable animated heading. And now you see that we have this effect and we want to have a typing effect. So let's choose animation type and let's choose the typewriter. And then you see we have the exact effect that I want. All right, so let's see which text we need. So let's choose a reel to start with. So that's the text before animated states. And then export the latest articles on both block. All right, so now we need to see which words we want to alternate. So the first one is WordPress. The second one is Divi. Then the third one is Elementor. And the last one is website. Okay, and we need some spacing between these and these. So let's add a space there. And let's see how this looks on the front end now. Let's go, here is our call to action. And here is our text. Okay, that looks quite nice already. Maybe we want it to last a little bit longer, let's say 1 second. So it's a bit slower like on the original side. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so now we need to add the latest block, and for that we are going to use the query loop block from Core Gutenberg. So that's this one. And we are just going to choose a pattern to start with, which looks like the pattern we actually want. And I have added some posts already, and we are going to choose this one. So a 3-column layout. All right. So I just added some posts to have some content over here. So if you go back to the website and go back to posts, then here you see the posts that I added, and I just added some text in it and a featured image. So this is the text, this is the featured image, and this is what we get in the query loop. Okay, so how is this built? So first of all, we have a grid of posts in 3 columns. So that's set over here. Let's see if we can change anything about that. I don't think we can. There's not much to style in the default WordPress blocks. Okay, so now we get the query loop block, and in that we've got a post template block, which contains this featured image, and it contains another group with some data in it. So it shows the categories, it shows the title, and it shows another row block which holds the author and a spacing, or actually a divider, and then the date. So what would we like to show? In this case, we want to show the title, featured image, the title. We want to show an excerpt, and we want to show a read more button. Okay, so we don't need all of these. So we're going to delete the complete group. We don't need the categories either. We actually don't need this group block. Let's just add the title over here, then add an excerpt. So that's a core block as well. And let's limit the amount of words to things like 30 or so. Maybe just a little bit less, like 25, maybe that's better. And then I want to add a read more button. And also that's a core block in this case. So let's see how that looks on the front end. This is the way it looks now. Of course, it's not perfect, but we do not have the styling options that we have with Greenshift on core blocks. So we can't do too much with that, unless, of course, we set a class, for example, here. And we are going to call this something like block. Add a global class, and then we can use subselectors to style these kind of things, as we did before. Yeah, but we're not going to bother with that right now, but that's a possibility. Okay, so that's it for the homepage for now.
So that's it for most of the homepage. In the next episode, we are going to use dynamic content to build out the testimonials, portfolio, and blog section using Greenshift's Query Builder. Subscribe so you don't miss anything, and see you then.